Let's see. Okay, so this is about a particular project, but I'm actually going to start out with a very few slides, if I can get this thing to move, about another project, which is not a building project, it's a project. So if you go to slide 3, see the map of the United States. One of the various hats I wear is as a board member for a nonprofit called the Net Zero Energy Coalition. We are North America wide. We are small, but like to think we are mighty. Becoming mightier all the time. A very important project that we conducted last year was an inventory of the residential net zero energy building stock in the U.S. and Canada. And what you're seeing here is just a snapshot of the results. So very, very interesting. There's a ton of great stuff in the inventory and the accompanying report. But I think a key thing is probably not even every zero energy project represented in this room is in the inventory. So the inventory is always growing. There's a link here so you can go add projects. Another important thing to note, well, there's a bunch of information on this slide, but I will draw attention to the lower right-hand corner, which is one of the very fascinating facts that we discovered through this, that fully 50% of the zero energy residential units are multifamily. And we also discovered that, what was it, Sean? Like 95% of the projects are more than 2 units. Right. So what we're understanding from this is a key thing, which is this is not a market-driven phenomenon. This is not consumers saying, hey, I want to buy one. This is stakeholders like yourselves who are saying, this is the right thing to do, so we're going to do it. And they're doing it in multi-unit and multifamily, and in many cases multi-building projects. And lo and behold, people are buying them and renting them and occupying them. They're not sitting vacant. So this is a case where we're not looking to the market to solve the problem. We're looking to the leadership of visionary folks like yourselves to solve this problem. So I think it's a really, really powerful message that is working. It is already working. In comparison with the number of housing units across the country, this is paltry, but it's also a pretty impressive start. So we can double this number overnight with people jumping in and doing more. Next slide shows the division. So this, when we talk about zero energy, so zero net energy, net zero energy, zero energy ready, you know, it's all pretty much the same thing. The basic idea is we are getting housing that pretty much is able to meet its own annual energy need, or it has the capability to do so with the addition of additional renewable energy facilities. So in some cases, these are homes that are built with the capability of adding solar. The roof is there, or maybe they've allowed for a wind turbine, but we all know that 90 plus, 95% plus of the housing that's going to be ZNE is solar driven as opposed to other energy methods. So we're looking at the whole spectrum of this housing. It all counts. It's all very important. It's all working towards a solution. And you can kind of see how this breaks down on the little pie chart. You can also see not all, but a number of the important stakeholder organizations that have collaborated with the coalition in developing this inventory, and all of which in their own ways are advancing this agenda. So get involved with any of these programs, all of them, by all means, the Net Zero Energy Coalition. Our job at the coalition is uniquely to facilitate the communication and collaboration amongst all the stakeholder organizations. We don't have a role other than that, to facilitate all of you working together more effectively so that we avoid duplication of efforts, we avoid counterproductive efforts, and help everybody do everything better, faster. Next slide. This is also a global phenomenon. And boom, next slide. It's happening at community scale. So beyond even groups of buildings, there are entire communities taking this on. This particular slide represents a meeting that I attended, John attended. I don't think anybody else in the room was at that particular meeting. This was in New York in March, right? The Pecanico meeting. And it was organized primarily by the Urban Sustainability Directors Network and a subsidiary group of that called the Climate Neutral Cities Alliance, along with Architecture 2030, the Rockefeller Brothers Foundation, which hosted us, and the Net Zero Energy Coalition as facilitators. And these cities were all represented there, and they were there to, once again, communicate and collaborate so that we can do things together better, faster. The same basic idea. These are all cities that have very aggressive goals towards reducing their carbon emissions in a very fast time frame, and they want to know how to do that as quickly as possible by learning from each other. So there are really fascinating programs emerging in all of these cities, very, very exciting, and more jumping on board as we speak. And also, Kathy, I think it was NBI, along with Architecture 2030 and Rocky Mountain Institute, just issued a 2-page white paper mere days ago. Amy, notwithstanding your issues about zero net carbon, it's on zero net carbon and essentially talking about that initiative. Are you going to talk more about that?
But Ed Rodriguez is presenting tomorrow night on it.
Okay, perfect. So we'll get Ed. I assume that's remote. Darn it. Yeah. Too bad Ed's not going to be here. Okay, I hate this computer. It always wants to restart itself when I'm in the middle of something. Don't do that, please. Thank you. This is really ancient. Normally I use my iPad. Sean's, bring your laptops. Like, I go, oh, geez, really? I've been trying to stall on buying a new one. At any rate, really, really great stuff happening in the cities. So be paying attention. Last slide on this particular subtopic is a really wonderful quote, should get everyone excited. Not only can we save the world, we might even be able to make a living saving the world. Hey, what could be better than that? So Lux Research, which is an international research firm, has said this is an enormous market. That is the technical term, enormous market that is emerging in the zero energy world. So don't be shy. Okay, part 2 is on just one zero energy home. A very humble zero energy home. We're now on slide 9. This is befittingly called Dream Creek. It's in Stockton. This is a Habitat for Humanity project that I've had the privilege of working on. And as you can see, it won't win any beauty contests, but if you have never owned a home before, maybe it will. So, and it's interesting because I've presented this house in a number of venues, including the AIA Monterey Design Conference, and you should have seen the looks there of like, ew, you're presenting that house? Like, that's ugly. Anyway, okay, but one of the big takeaways about this, call it ugly if you will, house, is if what I'm going to show you can be done with pretty much the minimum housing budget for a single family in California, then shame on anybody who can't do it with more budget. So let's take a look at this house. Okay, next slide, enclosure highlights. How many of us have been flogging the notion of advanced framing for multiple decades? Or as long as you've known about it? Pretty long time for some of us, right? Does anybody actually do advanced framing? Very, very few people do. Advanced framing is wonderful, right? Because you reduce thermal bridging, that improves thermal performance. It's a tenet of Passive House and many other things. And yet, it is still virtually impossible to get most builders to do it. This project achieved a 12.5% framing factor, when standard in California with all our seismic codes is, 25 to 35.
What does that mean?
Framing factor is the fraction of the wall that is occupied by solid wood, as opposed to insulation.
So 12.5 instead of 30%.
Yeah. It's a very, very big deal. And it's beautiful. If you look at this, the simplicity is incredible. Yeah.
These look like 2x8s, are they?
No, 2x4s. 2x6. Yeah, you're right. So I know the proportions look odd. We're just not used to seeing framing done so cleanly. And it changes the whole look of everything. There's a whole lot more depth. We're actually going to be publishing a report on this project pretty soon. It was a PG&E sponsored project, so it'll have a nice detailed report, so you'll be able to read a lot more, see a lot more pictures, understand a lot more about it. I don't have time to go into all the whys and hows. However, I think, and if, go to the next slide, you can start to, we'll just flip through some of these. So I'm not going to repeat all the information on the slides. I'm going to tell you a parallel story. The parallel story is the champion for this project is a guy named George Kurtzen, who's at least as old as the oldest person in this room, whoever that might be, possibly myself. And George has been in the building business, okay, maybe you. He's been in the building business for an extraordinarily long time. And the man is absolutely wired for efficiency. You can go ahead and flip forward a slide or 2 or 3 or 7. He also worked in some sort of production factory at one point, panelization or prefab or modular or something like that. So the guy lives, eats, sleeps, breathes efficiency. And he's always thinking of more and more clever ways to save resources, to save money, to save time, to save energy, operating energy and embodied energy, carbon, choose your metric. And George attended a series of classes that a number of my colleagues and I taught for PG&E probably about 5 years ago when we first got hired by PG&E to start doing the Zero Net Energy training. And George attended every class, took copious notes, and he has then gone out and applied these ideas and gone 5 times farther with them than anything we showed him in those 6 days of class. So this is the power of dedication, of education, of inspiration, and really applying knowledge in a practical situation. So what we're seeing here are all these things. Oh, one thing that's really kind of fun to talk about, the slide on the gable end trusses, where we've got 3 images. So he works with volunteers. He also, by the way, he trains people as he's doing these. So it's not like, oh, well, sure, you have to have really sophisticated workers to be able to accomplish this. No, actually, it's almost better to have workers who don't have prior training because you don't have to undo bad habits. So, but one of the issues is he's always thinking about their safety and simplifying the labor equation. He has his trusses prefabricated. He does these gable end trusses, which are doubled up, so they are a complete truss bay. They are sheathed. What this allows him to do is get his workers away from the roof edge so that they don't have to be cabled off. And so he's thinking this ahead, and he's also worked in a number of details that relate to the overall enclosure efficiency that are built into that truss design as well, and the way those trusses go onto the house. It's really quite phenomenal. The no-waste drywall splicing, he says, well, there's no reason to always end your drywall on a stud. Just run it till you run out of drywall, and you use your scrap OSB to splice behind it, and you just keep going. He saved, oh my gosh, I think he said he saved like 12 sheets of drywall in one of these little houses. And labor. And he's saved incredible amounts of lumber through the advanced framing. The real smart wiring, he runs all the wiring at the base of the wall through these notches. Don't compromise the bearing capacity of the studs at all. And it means there are that many fewer interruptions in all those stud bays. So it simplifies the insulation installation tremendously. And he stacks them up gets a drill, bzzzt, it's done.
So, Ann,
Brilliant, yeah.
this is particularly important when you're doing 24-inch on center framing, because if you have you have your hole drilled down through the middle of the stud, that wall already has too much flex, and that gives it a lot more. And
Good point.
So this way, you're maintaining the rigidity of that.
Yeah, and it has 5/8 drywall too, of course, because of the two 24-inch on center stuff. So let's see, and then the next one, you see the water heater. One of the few tweaks that we did at the consulting team. Again, he'd already learned whatever we had to offer years prior, but we were able to offer him a very few refinements on this plan. One was, hey, let's move that water heater from its location in the garage to the core of the house where all the plumbing is. As a result, the longest hot water line in the house is 12 feet. So pretty astonishing. We don't worry about recirculating at that point because it is virtually instantaneous.
Well, what about the air source if you're using a heat pump water heater, because if you pull from inside air, then you're cannibalizing the energy.
This is
unless you do ducted, you're going to have that effect.
Yeah, this is actually a tankless unit, and it's not a heat pump water heater.
So there are other issues when you use heat pump water heaters about the source of your air.
Yeah, this is not the universal solution, with every possible equipment configuration.
To your point, the sand and CO2 heat pump is a remote compressor with a CO2 line into the tank. So we have solutions for CO2 heat pumps.
Yeah. So actually, we're going to be doing another project with them starting up sometime soon, depending on the CEC and their funding cycles. Yeah, I know, right? So we're doing 2 houses in the same subdivision, and in this case, we're going to be doing an all-electric house and a mixed fuel house. And so we'll be looking at what some of those differences are and how it drives things one way or the other. So we'll get another report out of that. Actually, I think we're writing a book as part of that project. So yeah, we'll be definitely looking at those things. Let's see, any other highlights? Okay, so bottom line on page, there it is, 18, I think. This house, like around 1,800 square feet, we've got 2.5 kilowatts of PV meet the entire load for this house. So, and this is in a relatively severe climate. Stockton gets real hot and pretty cold.
Is that 2.5 in all of the electric offset, or is it a offsetting
full
gas
offset
as well?
Full offset.
Dang.
Yeah. So pretty good. And then the next slide, it's teeny tiny print, and the goal isn't for you to read all this print, but just to know that there's a lot more fine print. This is about maybe a quarter of the overall list of features that have been incorporated in this house. And the whole list will be in the final report. And that's it. So, thank you.